First of all, I would like to thank Vanna and the Association of Quaternary Researchers for giving me this opportunity to talk about the wetland ecosystem, which is one of the most important aspects, and what are the risks and what we should be doing. As we know that the wetland provide a lot of goods and services, and so to continue these services, it is necessary that the health of this ecosystem continues to be in a prime. And also, we need to see that how do we conserve them? What are the issues? That is what I'm going to talk today about this. Now, both inland and coastal system, because this is an area where the atmosphere, hydrosphere, geosphere, and biosphere interact. And there is a large amount of mass and energy transfer between them across these systems as well as within these systems. And that is why these are of a very high biological productivity. Also, it has a very high aesthetic value. So also, apart from that, these are the areas where host the ports and many other things. So the human beings are attracted to these areas, and that is why it is very important that the developmental activities and the conservation of the wetlands go hand in hand. Now we know that last the activity, industrial activity in last 150 years or so have impacted all the Earth system, especially all the aspects of the Earth system. And the changes which we are seeing, especially, of course, the first is, of course, the increase in the carbon dioxide, and then resultant increase in the temperature, which led to changes in the sea level and also changes in the precipitation patterns. So there are several changes which has been occurring, and this is affecting the wetlands. And we know that if these wetlands are affected, the many services which could be provisioning services or supporting services or cultural services likely to be affected, and that affect because the ecological services also has economic value, so it will affect the economy of the country and the overall of the world as well. Now we need to understand that how these ecosystems are responding to climate change and the variability. Now in the past we have seen that what all happens during such changes, these systems were affected. So first, I think let us have a look at that what changes which are happening and what are its implications. The first is, of course, we know that we have put the Paris Agreement that it should be 1.5 or it should not increase beyond 2 degrees, because anything beyond 2 degrees is likely to bring irreversible change. Now, two things are most critical in this. One, how stable our, yes, how stable is our ice sheets in both in the Greenland and in Antarctica. Now, whether we know that the Holocene period, which is a very stable period, the temperature was around 15 degrees or so. And since the climate was stable, this is a period when civilizations flourished. We also know during this Holocene period, wherever there were major climatic changes, the civilization either collapsed or there were certain issues where they need to migrate from one place to the other place. The main example, of course, you are quite familiar about the Meghalaya or around 4,500 years ago, which coincided with the drought and the cold phase. And we have seen that Harappan civilization collapsed during that time. So whether that changes which happens. So we need to understand that now what possible changes are occurring or likely to occur in this period. The one first most important thing is the changes within the monsoon pattern. We have seen that any change in the monsoon pattern can bring major impact on the civilizations. The second, which is we are seeing now the increasing frequency of extreme events. We have seen recently in Gujarat, the flooding remained for almost 3 days. And there is no major river, it's a very small river, but even then, the flooding. So the extreme events is another important issue. We know that in Himalaya, most of the glaciers are retreating, and that will have a lot of implications on the availability of water in short term and in the long term also. The melting of ice sheets, especially Greenland and Antarctica, as well as the thermal expansion of the sea level is also rising, and this would affect mainly the coastal regions. We also know that because of such changes, there would be changes in the biodiversity. It may be either loss or change. We have seen over a period of time how biodiversity changed, say, let's say last 40, 50 million years ago. We have the records and we know that things have changed as the climate is changing. We have also seen the regime shift and algal bloom, which I'll give you example later. So these are some of the process which whether it indicates that we are moving out of the stable system or not. As of now, we are still within the stable system, but if the temperature goes beyond 2 degrees, there could be catastrophic changes. Now, this some of the things which is happening now and the projections. We know that the likely projection is 2.4 if we try to contain our development. And if it is a high emission scenario, it could go up to 4.4. Even then, the carbon dioxide would be about 485 or so. The ocean temperature is increasing. We know that because of the rise in the temperature, there is a more moisture into the atmosphere. And the water vapor is again a greenhouse gas. And we are seeing that the changes in the mean, extreme, and interannual precipitation happening. This evidence is very clear. We are also seeing that both the drought and floods, even within the India itself, we have been seeing that one area may be under floods, but the other area may be under drought. So this also is increasing, and this is very typical of the extreme events which is happening. We are also likely to see, because of the increased extreme events, the flooding, especially in the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Jamuna, also in the peninsular rivers, we have been witnessing the increased flooding. The seasonal snowfall, especially in the Western Himalaya, has been now decreasing. So that because of the temperature, both maximum and minimum has increased, and this increase is much more than in the plains. And we know that this could reduce overall the supply of water about 8 to 20% in this. And this is very critical, especially in case of the Indus, because the Indus provides water during the summer, not only to northwest India, but also to Pakistan. Then entire food is dependent on that. The sea level is also increasing at about 3.3 millimeter, which is higher than the rest of the area. And this is also happening because of the weakening of the monsoon wind. So there is a lot of interplay between the different aspects, that if one system changes, how it affects the other. And we expect that about minimum 0.6 meter rise could be possible. And this we have seen during quaternary period, that even this kind of a 0.6 to a meter change can bring dramatic changes. The all milliolite limestone deposition, which you all are know quite well, happened when the sea level was almost about a meter low. The frequency of cyclones are increasing in the Arabian Sea. We have seen that the cyclones, which were very once in a while, now it is a regular affair in every year. Similar thing in the West Bay of Bengal. The frequency has not increased, but the intensity has increased. And once the low pressure event develops, most of the time it converts into a cyclonic storm. Now, this is the data. What is different models? This is the IITM Earth System model, uh, which shows pretty good comparison with the CMPI 6. You can see that based on the historical data. But of course, the changes on the projections that by 69, we may have a temperature rise of about 1.6 to 1.7. And that would translate into the increase, the daily rainfall could be about 0.25. So this is going to be quite heavy. That means you will have, currently is about 87, 88 centimeter. This is likely to increase about 90, 92. This could be a major change, that if such a large change is likely to happen. Now, we also know this, the warming is not sort of a linear, we have seen between 2001 and 2011 or 2010 that the warming was slowed down. Now, we don't know exactly why it has happened, but the things are not that everything is going to be in a linear fashion. There would be changes in the intensity and the magnitude, which could be also very important. Now, this is the different models are there. We won't go into details, but all of them says that there would be a decrease in the light rain and increase in the heavy precipitation. And this, all of us, we have been experiencing now. And this is likely to continue further. And as time goes, the probability of the extremes are likely to further increase. Now, we will see that what changes which are now witnessing. We have seen that in the Himalayas, the temperature is going to rise, which is there is no issue. We also saw that the snowfall is going to decrease. Now, but in Karakoram, the snowfall is increasing because of the increase in the frequency of western disturbances. So we know that the glaciers in Karakoram are either stable or advancing. But in Himalaya, the glaciers are retreating and the rate could be something as low as 1 meter and as high as a 60 meter. The total loss, which is estimated, is about 16 to 17% in Indian Himalaya, which is more or less similar to what is estimated in the Chinese Himalaya. So this data is pretty good. Also, we have seen that in Western Himalaya, they are retreating slowly, while in the monsoon dominated, it is retreating much faster. Now, based on the different models and it could be if the intermediate scenario, low and high emission, could be 10%, and in the high could be of 27%. So this is an estimator which could be lost because of the increase in the emission. So there were some earlier reports that by 2035 all glaciers will be lost. It's a little bit too much. There would be a loss, but loss is not going to be of that kind. Now, the problem which we have is that the mass balance of the glaciers, very few glaciers we have, and that glaciers we cannot say that represents the entire Himalaya. So we need to have a methods to find the mass balance of the all glaciers, and what kind of a change is occurring is very important. Now, GRACE has shown that is about 4 billion tons of ice is being lost. But this is on a very large scale, and this is primarily in the Tibetan area, where here to estimate the total loss is a challenge, and I think we need to find ways and means how we can address this issue. The other thing which we have noticed is the rainy season in Northwest and Northeast is been changing. It was in Northwest is 50 to 70 and Northeast 150 to 60 days. We have seen that in recent decades, as last specifically 2 decades, the rainy days in Northwest has increased and rainy days in Northeast have decreased. And this could be quite substantial change can happen about the 50 to 200% change can happen. And I'll show you some examples. We have seen the increasing events in Gujarat, Rajasthan, Pakistan. The extreme events of flooding has increased tremendously. I mean, it is this time we have seen the flooding in Kutch and Saurashtra, last year in Rajasthan, a few years back Kashmir. So this kind of flooding is not not very common in this region, and this is increasing quite substantially. And this could be further, if rainfall further increases, then this kind of events is likely to further increase. Now, the current, whatever the changes which we are seeing, it is possible that we may be able to address, though we have seen that all these extreme events have brought a lot of misery. The flooding, we have seen Kerala landslides. So in different region, it manifests in a different aspects, but it is still manageable with the kind of resources we have been able to manage. Now, the only issue is that this kind of a frequency, if it happens not once in a season, but if it 2 times, 3 times in a season, whether we would be able to manage. The second thing has been noticed is that the increase in the rainy days in West indicates that the monsoon has been shifting again westwards. And this would lead to greening of the Thar Desert, and also it could improve the conditions. This is known that even the Harappan, that time, the monsoon shifted from west to east. And this exactly how it happens, why it happens, what is the time is not pretty well understood. But it has been noticed that this kind of thing has happening. And now he's again shifting back to westwards. The other issues is that these extremes, the cities are not able to manage. We've seen that the urban floods have increased dramatically, and this could lead to quite a bit of loss in terms of economic loss. And now this is the work done on the last 20 years, and you can see that how the productivity, of course, this is a crop productivity, but basically it depends on the availability of moisture. And you can see in 2020, from last 20 years, there is a substantial increase in the productivity in the monsoon in the West. You can see on this particular region, you can see that it has drastically changed. This was all in 2001. Now you can see it has turned into yellow. So there is a major change in the productivity pattern, and that's essentially because of the increased availability of moisture into the soil. Now we go to some of the impacts on the coastal system. We know that the mangroves, corals, and seagrasses are very critical, and for a variety of reasons, and we need to know how their structure functions and what is their vulnerability to this. The most important role which they play is in the carbon sequestration and storage of the resultant carbon. So this is going to be a major contribution of the mangrove ecosystem or the coastal ecosystems, where they store large amount of carbon into. Now, if you look at the mangroves of last, India has an extremely good system. By every 2 years, the forest, including mangroves, are monitored using the satellite data. And this is been verified, and the validation and quite robust data sets for last several years, almost 40 years or so. And you can see that the changes which have been seen in different states. Now, you can see that overall there is a change, almost about more than 900 square kilometer has increased in last 40 years. So this essentially means that the efforts of conservation and of course new plantation has definitely helped. There is also another aspect that you can see that the development and the conservation can go hand in hand. You can see that in Gujarat and Maharashtra, the most industrialist states have increased in the mangroves. That is essentially because of the awareness of communities and the government and of course the industry. So there it is increasing, but the other areas which are not that industrialized also show more or less stable, but there is no much decrease in, except in Andaman and Nicobar, there is a decrease. There is a reason, mainly during tsunami, the large damage happened and it has yet not been able to recover. So, but overall, you can see that the is quite, and the carbon stock is about 52.5 million. This is a huge carbon stock in this system. The other thing which is important to know is that the changes which are occurring because of the changes in the monsoon pattern, also changes into because of the damming of the rivers and all. You can see this another case where from 1973 to present, the one of the spit has been monitored, and you can see that how this spit has been gradually being eroded, and now practically it's not there. Now, this kind of thing, as you know, that the deltaic region is essentially a depositional feature, and the spit is a depositional feature. But when the depositional feature itself gets eroded, that is essentially because of the amount of sediments which is required is not coming to the shore. And this is also important because this sediment also leads to the carbon accumulation. Because if you don't have the sediment, you can see the vegetation, mangroves and all which were there on also vanished with that, along with that. So this, the new land which is to be developed in the deltaic region, which will be ultimately uh, by the mangroves and all, they will start coming up, also get lost. If such kind of change, I mean, so there is a constant pressure on the coastal regions, especially because of the low delivery of the sediments to the coast. And if you see in Kaveri, practically there are no sediments coming to the sea. Most of the sediments are within the system itself. So this kind of changes which are occurring, I think we need to record and understand that what actually happening to the deltaic region. Now, the other thing which is very important, that when we talk about the climate change, most of the time we worry more about the increase in the temperature. We don't worry too much on the carbon dioxide itself. Now, as you know, that the carbon dioxide affects the leaf physiology and ultimately the photosynthesis. There are certain experiments which has found that the big increase in the carbon dioxide, there could be a reduction in stomatal conduction, almost about 20%. And that is why the leaf area has to increase so that to keep the primary production on the same line. And this, I'm trying to get some evidences that whether there is any change in the leaf area. I've been talking to Benita for quite some time, and she helped me quite a bit, but I have not yet got real evidence. But this increase in the carbon dioxide, I think we have to worry more from the vegetational point of view. And this area is one of the major research area in my view. The second thing which is also important is that the deltaic mangroves, we have seen, especially in the Sundarbans, that because the freshwater supply has been reduced and the marine influence is increasing because of the rise in the sea level, the species change. We have seen that the typical deltaic mangrove like Sundari or Heritaria is now giving way to Avicennia, which are more steady and marine tolerant. So freshwater loving mangroves are being reduced, and the salt loving mangroves, Avicennia, are now increasing on the deltaic region. So this kind of change will occur. And this is also important because there are certain fauna also associated with the particular type of a mangrove. So those kind of a changes are undergoing, but we do not have a proper record of those things, that how things have been changing. Also, the climate will the change also the carbon burial rates. This is another area which we need to address. Also, the different communities respond differently. Like if there is a cyclone, which increasing frequency of cyclone, we have seen that the Avicennia gets affected much more because of their uh, roots, tilt roots, get covered with the mud, and the mangrove shades their leaves. While rhizophora and all, which has a stilt root, they survive better. So different types of species likely to get affected quite differently. And I think we need to understand this response of different types of mangroves, that what exactly is likely to happen, not only because of the temperature, carbon dioxide, but also the extreme events, the rise in sea level, and we need to understand and model them. Now, the what we main important aspect is that our understanding about the carbon accumulation is very limited. We know that the mangrove sequester carbon much faster. All those things are known. We know that area is increased, but exactly what is happening, and as I told you, that between the carbon accumulation and the sediment, what kind of relationship they have, and how we can able to model them so that we have a better understanding. The next is on the fisheries. We have that the health of the mangroves and the fisheries is linear. We have seen wherever the mangroves are not there, the fish stock does, because the all nurseries do not survive. Now, the almost 30% of our coastline is under erosion. So that means it also affects the mangrove, and ultimately it will affect the fisheries. The other is on the regime shift, which I will give you the one example. Now, what we have seen on the uh, West Coast, many of you from West Coast may be quite familiar that the sardine and mackerel were prevalent on Kerala and Karnataka coast only. Before 1985, we have no evidence to get sardine and mackerel either in Maharashtra, Goa, or on the East Coast. After 1985, we have seen that the sardine and mackerel have reduced on the Kerala and on Karnataka. While we are getting 2 years back, there was a bumper crop on the Maharashtra coast of the sardine. And now on East Coast also, you get ample sardine and mackerel. Now, this is happening essentially because of the warming of the sea, and the fish has started migrating towards north, which is cooler and also deeper. So there are some issues that the Kerala, the fish is reducing because of the overfishing. It's not only overfishing. There could be in some area that could be a reason, but the main thing is that the water has warmed and the sardine and mackerel has started shifting to the cooler regions. So this now, since this is happening, we need to also build models that are specific to a species like sardine or mackerel. What are likely production going to happen in a particular season and where? Because the fishing can be planned accordingly. Now, this is an area which is a little challenging, but I think it is very important with the changing climate. They're going to shift in the fishery, and this is not happening only in India. It is happening on the Norway coast and many other where the traditional fish is going upwards, but some new fish species also coming. Like now, Kerala gets a lot of squids because the environment is suitable for the squids. So this kind of changes are going to happen. We have observed but not yet modeled. So we need to model this kind of a changes. The second important aspect is the coral reefs. And we know that the bleaching, the soft corals succumb first to the bleaching. And but we have also seen that the same area, the soft corals, acropora, doesn't get bleached in the next cycle. That means they build certain resilience to increase into the coral reefs. Now, the second thing is we know there is a symbiotic relationship between the corals and the algae. So, whether the algae is adapting to the higher temperature, and since the food is available, that's why the coral is surviving, or the corals is adapting to the higher temperature. I mean, that question is not very clear, but I think it's very certain that even in Persian Gulf, the 36 centimeter, the corals do survive. So the fear that we will lose corals because of the increasing temperature is little bit a problem. But the problem is different. The problem, in my view, is more because of the acidification and the change in pH along with the increased temperature can affect corals much more than the only increase in the temperature. So we need to see that how much pH is changing, not alone the temperature. And most of the time, the measurements of pH are not available, or if it is available, it is not available at the accuracy at which we need because the changes in pH is very small and we need to measure very accurately. Now, the other aspect in this is the with the rising sea level, the corals also will grow if the rise is very slow and the corals are in healthy condition. We have seen that the corals have survived last 450 million years, and where the lot of change in the sea level, temperature, carbon dioxide, they have survived. Of course, the species can be different. But there is another major issue which is now coming up is the increasing cyclonic eddies, which actually increases the primary production so high that it kind of the breathing of the corals cannot happen, and that also likely to affect the corals much more. So corals also likely to be affected by cyclonic eddies, like that mangroves could be by cyclone. So these are the extreme events I think we need to focus to understand what is likely to happen. Now, the important thing is the economic value. Why it is important? For conservation, if we want to convince the decision makers, we also have to find out what is likely value. Like mangroves, we know that the value could be about one estimate 3,300 US dollars annually of a 1 hectare. Similarly, also for the corals, there is a huge economic value in terms of how much carbon they sequester, how much tourism, and all such things. So this is an area where we must estimate the economic value of the ecosystem services. And second, which is important, is that how the pH is going to change at different IPCC scenarios. I think that is another area where we need to, like we model many other things, but we need to model because that would have a major impact on the carbonate system. Of course, the more or less same thing will happen in the inland water bodies. But inland water bodies, what is likely to change is that the warming will change the metabolism and the flora and flora, which are temperature sensitive, there could be a major change. The second thing is the increasing nutrient load. The climate alone is not responsible, but also the runoff from the agriculture field because of the extreme rains and all. The nutrient supply is likely to be higher. And there, the phytoplankton community is likely to change from diatom and green algae to cyanobacteria or blue green algae and could be toxic. Now, this change in the phytoplankton can also affect the change in the copepods and zooplanktons and ultimately the tertiary fishery. So we need to understand this aspect in the inland water bodies as well, that how also in the rivers and the inland water bodies, the increase in the temperature, what kind of changes is occurring. The same thing in glaciers also, when it is likely to change, it will affect the species diversity, abundance, and structure. So in both in glaciers, in rivers, and this changes are going to happen. But the important thing is we need to monitor and record them. Now, the water quality is one which we can tell us what is happening. And there are a fixed, like what you measure, the phosphorus, uh, the turbidity and chlorophyll, along with the BOD, COD and all that. But minimum 3 parameters, chlorophyll, temperature, and turbidity. I think these itself will tell us that what is likely to happen to our inland water bodies. The second is the harmful algal blooms, which increases with the rise in temperature. And we have a monitoring system, but not a warning system. Because this is going to be important because the lot of toxic algae, and we need to advise the fishermen that not to mine, not to fish in those areas where such algal blooms are. So we need a model which integrates the changes like temperature, precipitation, and of course land use, because the land use is also important, and the socio-economic conditions, so that we can tell to the people who are dependent on the wetlands what is likely to happen. We know most of the time what is the, but we fail to integrate the socio-economic aspects also into our models. This I will. Now, what we need to do is that we need to monitor, as I told you, we need a what is the pattern, what is the structure and attributes, and what rate at they are changing, and what kind of change. The other thing which we need to measure is the leaf area and biomass of major species and changes which are occurring in the phytoplankton into water bodies. Now, next is how do we relate these changes and the different processes which are happening. So, including the anthropogenic act. So, once we have this kind of a data, you model them, this relationship, and that will able to provide what is likely to happen. One thing which is very important, which we need to do, which in ocean it is being already done, is the ocean biogeographical information system. We do not have similar system on, say, wetland biogeographical information system or a coastal biological information system. We do have information, the Botanical Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India, many universities and all that collect a lot of data on the taxonomy and all that, but there is no location. So we don't know where the changes occurred. So that information is not sufficient. We need a location of particular species, that this is an area we had this species. After 5 years, you go and see whether same species are there or there is a change. That kind of a system is very critical to understand how the climate is changing, because we talk a lot of about biodiversity, loss, these, etc. But we are not trying to do a build information system. In whichever area we collect, I think the location is the most critical aspect. Now, some of the approaches which we have is, of course, identifying the protected areas. And we have seen that in many of these marine protected area, biosphere reserve, things have either improved or at least it maintained at that level. So this aspect need to be continued to identify the protected area. In India, we have a regulation, coastal regulation zone known as a CRZ, which defines the construction setback line from the coast. And last 30, almost 30 years, uh, this has helped quite a bit to regulate activities on the coast. The many people may agree or disagree, but you have seen in the data that the mangroves have increased from 4,000 to almost 5,000. And the coastal zone management plans for the entire country is available. We have a high tide line, which is visible and verifiable on ground, is now available for the entire country. Also, the different aspects, which are the vulnerable areas, all those aspects are available. We have advisories for the cyclone, tsunami, floods, and all. So basically, these are the uh, aspect which allows us to adapt to the changes which are likely to happen. So, though all of these were not essentially done to address the climate change issue, but they have helped to adapt to the changes because we know what is likely to happen. The second thing which we need is the how do we manage? What we need a change is that the entire ecosystem we need to now address, not individual aspects. So that is the another important thing which we need, because then only we would be able to sustain the biodiversity, nutrient cycling, and all such aspects would be possible to do. The lastly, what I would like to say is that we need a predictive models where we can use the climate, topography, oceanobiogeography, all those kind of things we should be able to integrate. So we can anticipate what is likely to happen after 5 years, after 10 years, after 15 years. And accordingly, we can make our plans. Now, we don't have that kind of a models, and that is what I think is most important. And that is not available because our current understanding about the wetland and climate change and the anthropogenic activity. How do we find that this particular change is because of the climate change or because of the anthropogenic activity? Because what we are seeing is a change, but we are not able to ascribe a reason for this change. So our understanding has to improve about these aspects. And the last is the last two things, the fisheries. I think we need these predictive models, which is the shift which is occurring in the fisheries. We need a predictive models, and also the models for flooding and the other things. The overall, what I would like to say is that we need to generate a knowledge about a particular system. Say in this case, we are discussing about wetland. So we need to generate knowledge. We need to have our understanding about impacts of climate change on the wetland. So that is a one aspect which is very critical. The second is how the government is responding to this knowledge. So we have a certain protected areas or CRZ rules, or now whether they are enough or what needs to be further, how government should respond to this. And the last is this aspects, even if these two are there, whether people are conscious about protecting wetlands or not. So awareness, the consciousness of the community is also equally important. So we need a total integration of our knowledge, which is dynamic. It has going to increase with the time, and how that, so that's why the response of government over a time also has to change. At the same time, we need to make people aware that what climate change is, how do we adapt to them, and what actions are being taken to mitigate this. With this, with this opportunity, I am extremely grateful and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving a rich and comprehensive overview of the significance of wetland ecosystems, impacts, and projected changes in the Indian region, especially in the wake of ongoing climate change, and especially in terms of the wetland, how they are going to be impacted. And most importantly, giving us the way ahead in terms of research priorities, the conservation approaches for wetlands, wetland ecosystems, and the guidelines for especially which can be used in policy and governance. So with this, I think I open the floor for questions, and I ask the participants if they have any questions. They can either post it in the chat box or they can request the floor for question.
There is
Okay.
one question in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. So there is one question that is 90% of wetlands are outside the protected areas. How to bring them under protection?
Yeah, actually, every time you don't need a government support and declare them as a protected and all. That is why the community awareness is very critical. And if we make people aware of the importance of the wetlands, uh, that is the best thing to have wetlands into healthy conditions. I'll give you one example. It's not a very good example, but it conveys why community is important. Long back in 80s, I visited one island in Kutch, which is called Ajat Tapu. That's the only island where the human population is there. Now, at that time, we were mapping the mangroves, and we thought that since people are there, in this place, the mangroves will be the worst condition. But to our surprise, it was thriving there. Now, why they were protecting is little difficult, because at that time smuggling was very much in crime, and the mangrove provided extremely good shelter to hide those goods, and it is impossible to get in. But what I want to say is, once the community is aware of the importance, they themselves will protect. And we don't try to put emphasis on the consciousness of the people. we always want government to do, but we don't want each and us want to do anything. So wherever we are living, if we ourselves generate the consciousness about protection of a wetland, I think the wetlands will get protected. There is nobody can do anything.
Thank you, sir. There's another question in the chat box. I'll read it out. What is, sir, just a minute. What is being done for integration of existing data and who to contact to join this initiative? I think he means that the conservation, initiative.
Currently, the coastal zone is being managed as per the coastal zone regulation notification, which was original in 92 and then 2011 and 2019. And the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Zone Management, the Autonomous Institute under Ministry of Environment and Forest, is responsible to integrate all these data sets and provide a coastal zone management plans. And the concerned state government are supposed to not only to prepare plans, but also to implement those regulations. And in the state government, ultimately it goes to the district collector, and that is the system by which it is being done. And I understand there's all this information is available in the public on their website, and anybody can see those maps, and anybody can comment on that. And if something is not happening as per that, you can report, and the collector has sufficient powers to take action on these aspects. There is also a lot of work being done by the National Center for Coastal Research, the Ministry of Earth Science, which does understanding about the changes on the coastal processes, especially how it is translated into change into the shoreline, how the economic value of the ecosystem can be computed, what should be the accounting framework, what is the water quality is measured at about 24 different points, and the information is provided to the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Board to take necessary action. So there is a mechanism by which it is, and there are many other, I mean, I'm not saying, but the mechanism exists about the observation and certain amount of understanding on related to that. What is missing is some kind of a predictive modeling. That is what I want to insist upon, that what is happening, we have certain rules, regulations to do that. But what is likely to happen after 5 years? What is likely to happen after 10 years, 15 years, or 2050? That kind of a modeling which we need to address. Because unless we do that, some of the actions which we need to take could not happen immediately. If we have to change, let's say, current existing rules, it will take time. So if we know that this is what going to happen in 2050, we can start preparing from now itself. So that is what I think the major research area which we need to address.
There is one question from Sukas. Do we need to set up time series station in different wetland ecosystem to see and understand long-term changes?
Yeah, definitely. I think the time series is the most critical, and now it has. There are some places, one or two places, there are flux towers have been done in, I think, Koringa and another couple of them. There are the water buoys which measures the various water quality parameters, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And what in my view more important is we need a wetland biogeographical information system that you record all kinds of life from top to bottom with a
Yeah,
particular location, and then see that uh, something like a census, we do census every 10 years to see that how population is changing or education is changing. I think we need a similar system that every 10 years, let us do the census of a life, both flora, fauna, everything, and see the change. That is what I think is the important.
thank you, sir. There is one more question from Dr. Vandana Prasad. Which region, whether western or eastern coastal region, will be most affected by the climate change?
Uh, Actually, all area will be affected. There is nothing like this area will be, but the topography of the East Coast is much more gentler than on the West Coast because so the inundation, let's say if we take example of a cyclone, the storm surge is likely to go much inland than compared to West Coast, except Gujarat. Gujarat again is a very flat terrain. So the suppose the inundation is low, it is true that the damage also would be low, but that is not the only thing. The thing is, there could be other issues. Like if we have seen that when the cyclone went to Maharashtra or Kerala, the damage was there. Same like Kerala, when the extreme rainfall, the landslides created a lot of damage. On East Coast, you won't have a landslide. So the problem could be of a different nature because of these extremes, which could be precipitation or a cyclone or heat waves or a cold waves. Like we have seen the heat waves, more people die in Orissa, not in Rajasthan, though the temperature is much higher. But in Orissa, the humidity is also very high. So it is not one factor. We have to see all factors together and see. In my view, the all areas will be affected. I don't think there is any area which we can say that they are relatively safe. You can be safe from one particular hazard, but not the some or other hazard which is likely to happen.
Thank you, sir. There is one more question from Prabin. As a geologist, we can grasp the realities of climate change and foresee the potential challenges ahead. What initiatives currently exist from the government to bridge this knowledge with society? Additionally, what type of initiative would you like to see implemented in future to strengthen this connection?
See, the most important thing in currently in the climate change scenario is we have a lot of emphasis on mitigation. And it's right. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with it. Like we are trying to have more renewable energy, trying to reduce the emission and all those aspects, more efficient systems like the LED bulbs, drastically lowered the consumption. We had used to 60 watts. Now the same light we are getting with 9 watts. So that efficiency itself, but what we have not done is the adaptation part. How do we adapt to the changes which are occurring now? In a sense that what happens is, like as I gave you example, when you shifted from sardine mackerel to squids, now the how to fish squids is quite different than how to fish sardine or a mackerel. Now we have not taught our people that how exactly you should do. So what they are doing is they use a lot of plastics to catch these squids, which is again harmful. In Kerala, what is happening in the paddy fields during monsoon, the seawater enters to their paddy field. So they thought it may be a good idea to have the prawn culture. And that system was existing earlier locally called Pokeli, and in West Bengal, Berry. But these farmers don't know how to actually rear prawns. So just by putting some seeds of prawns, you don't get it. So when you change, the system is changing, we need a also adaptation system. And that is not as robust as it should have been. And I think we need to develop a good adaptation system because the mitigation is done, need to be done globally, and the government role is very critical. But the adaptation has to be done locally. And that is why local communities, local institutes, research institute has to provide information that in this particular area, how do we adapt to this thing? So that is, I think, is very important.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I will do one last question because it's from a student. So it's quite a contrast question from what Praveen asked. So as a geography student, what is the possibility of conserving and protecting the wetlands of our own region, or what initiative can we to cover up such problem without government intervention?
Yeah, I think that's a very good. We should start thinking that what we can do instead of what others can do. And the more first important thing in, suppose you are in a research institute or wherever you are, and the most important thing is three aspects are to be measured. One, as I told, chlorophyll turbidity and temperature. I think uh, not too many things to begin with, even if you would know, like, see, when you go to a doctor, what he does first thing, he take your temperature. If temperature is okay, this is fine. Then he will see, okay, your pulse, okay. He won't go ask you straight away, go and get your CT scan done or go and do MRI done, right? Same thing we should learn. We should see, okay, there is some problem in the health, then you go to BOD, COD, this, that, etc., further. But the basic thing we must have to learn that to judge a health of a wetland is very critical with a minimum number of parameters. As a scientist, of course, we need to do more intense study. I'm not saying that. But the common people has to learn these aspects, that the basic thing, once you have identified that there is a problem in the health, then you go to the next level where you need more advanced instrumentation, measurement, sampling strategy, all kinds of things. So this is what I would say. Make it simple. That is best to go forward.
Yes, thank you, sir. And there are a lot of comments and questions are there, and we'll not take further, and we'll move on to the next part of the program. So I invite Professor Pradeep Srivastava to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Karthik. And it is so satisfying to propose the vote of thanks at the event that carries such a wonderful uh, service to the academics, and the event that is kick-starting our efforts towards a successful event that we are going to organize as INQUA 2027 in February of 2027. Sir, I thank you. On behalf of Association of Quaternary Researchers, whole quaternary community of India, and every member who are working towards a successful event, I thank you for accepting our request and delivering a talk that carries such an immense value to this ecosystem services and how a scientist can deliver to reap best out of it. And this fits very well to the motto of INQUA 2027, that's science, quaternary sciences for the societal services. So thank you very much, sir, for taking time out of your very busy schedule and enriching us with your words and the science you delivered. And we hope to continue having your support and guidance in successfully organizing this, INQUA 2027. So we'll be in touch, of course, and we are meeting very soon towards this. I thank all the seniors who have blessed us in this first meeting, Professor S.K. Tandon, Professor Rajiv Nigam Sahab, Professor Vishwas Kale, Professor S.B. Ota, Dr. Mohanty, Dr. Shanti Papu, Dr. Shivaji, and Dr. Anupma Krishnamurthy, many more senior scientists who have joined, and they have joined the band of that is gaining the momentum for INQUA organization. So thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this. I thank Professor Dr. Vandana Prasad, President, Association of Quaternary Researchers, and all the team that is working towards the organization of various activities. This is one of them, and for successfully conducting and kickstarting the event. And all the attendees are, deserve to be applauded, and they joined. They took time towards, in joining this event in the weekend. And this is just not their joining, but I consider them becoming the volunteer of INQUA roadmap to INQUA 2027. And I hope that we'll keep on having your valuable time and valuable mind towards this. I thank all the attendees, and I also thank INQUA executive, Dr. Aritina Haliouk, for extending her help and providing the INQUA platform for advertising the event and for hosting this event.